Great. So access, passage, and whether we can eat the fish, and health concerns. Great topics. Non-point source pollution. Definitely always something to hear more about. Green infrastructure.
Our group mentioned buyouts. Oh, there you go, Courtney.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've been hearing more about that. If anyone saw the Boston Globe this morning, I think it was this morning. Anything else? Those are all great topics. We can find some speakers for you in those different things. Awesome. So, let me see here. Our next thing on our agenda is Heidi Ritchie. So Heidi is Director of Policy at Mass Audubon, and she's going to be talking to us about growing solar, protecting nature, and also the new proposed regulation changes from DEP. Heidi, do you want me to share kind of a background image, or do you have slides that you want to share?
I have slides on growing solar, and I thought we could do that first and answer any questions on that, and then you can tell me at that point how much time you want to talk about the wetlands regs, and yeah.
Great. You should be able to share your screen anytime.
Okay. Let's see if I can figure out how to do this. All right. Share screen. I need to. Okay, so you can see it, right? But I need to put it in presentation mode.
Yeah, exactly.
How's that?
Oh, perfect. You got it.
Okay, great. So this is a brief overview of our Growing Solar Protecting Nature report that we issued a couple months ago. This cover picture is our installation of a small ground mount array at our Boston Nature Center. So this was a project that Mass Audubon did with some other external experts. So we tapped into Harvard Forest on some of the geospatial mapping, and in particular, Jonathan Thompson and his staff have done some very intensive mapping of carbon across the landscape. And they've been doing that for the state. So, we did our project kind of using some of the same methodologies and modeling that the state's already using on their clean energy and climate modeling. Same with Evolved Energy Research. They've also done work for the state. They're a energy modeling consulting firm. So, what brought us to this whole study was the proliferation of large ground mounted solar arrays across the state. And these are arrays installed as of, I think, 2020. And you can see there's a large concentration in the Blackstone area, right? Yes. South central Massachusetts, also southeast Mass. In total, to date, there's been about 10,000 acres of land altered for these projects. And about half of that was formerly forest. Now, we approached this study recognizing the importance of solar in the transition to net zero carbon emissions by 2050. And the state needs to get about 27 gigawatts of solar power by then. We're at a little over 4 now. And we've actually achieved a lot of deployment within the built environment as well. The state's kind of been a leader on that. I'll talk about that a little bit more. But we wanted to study, is there a way to get to the state's goals while still, minimizing impacts on important land? Because obviously forests are important for carbon, but also for many other reasons, as you all know. And I don't need to tell you all about that. So we looked at doing modeling different scenarios, kind of, business as usual trend, the current practice, and then a sort of a mid-impact scenario. What if we excluded all prime farmland, important biomap biodiversity lands, the highest, the lands with the highest amount of carbon in existing forests, etc. And the lands that TNC has identified as being most important for climate resilience. And then a third scenario that was really like the most stringent and eliminated virtually all forests, stayed out of all floodplains, etc. So we looked at the potential within the built environment and did some analysis of rooftops and other lands within the built environment, parking lots, landscaped areas, you know, the big lawns or landscaped areas on commercial or industrial property, etc. While excluding things like, you can see there's some active ball fields on there, and we tried to exclude things like that we didn't think would be appropriate. We excluded cemeteries also, for example. And then within this, you know, we didn't say like every rooftop was going to be suitable, right? We know that many rooftops are not suitable for a host of reasons, either the age and capacity of the structure to support solar, the angle that they're at, you know, other considerations. So we used some data from the National Renewable Energy Lab. I think it's about 30% of rooftops, you know, were included. And then with parking lots, we looked at parking lots that were of a certain size, and then we had, you know, setbacks to roads and buildings and things like that. So after we looked at what was technically feasible, we ran some economic modeling using the model that Evolved Energy has developed. Where would it be most cost effective to deploy solar? And so looking just at current trends with none of those restrictions on like what kinds of land these projects could go on, we found there's, you know, tremendous amount of land where they could potentially continue to go, but it would impact forests and whatnot. And of those, about 51,000 acres were most economically attractive. And then when we did the analysis with the mid-impact scenario, excluding those most ecologically and carbon intensive important areas, you know, we found that there's 41,000 acres that are economically attractive. So it's, you know, it's somewhat less than the current as usual approach, but it's still quite a lot of area available for these projects. What you'll notice here, though, is that the projects are generally much smaller and more dispersed. And that has a relationship to the issues that we're facing with the grid and interconnections. Right now, there are a lot of solar projects that are in the queue waiting to get built, and they can't because the distribution grid doesn't have the capacity to accept the power from these proposed large projects in remote areas. And there's some information out there that indicates that it, you know, it'd be easier to integrate many smaller projects, particularly if, like, let's say it's a large commercial building with a large array on its roof. If they also had a some battery storage package with that same project on the same site, and it's basically like a little microgrid, then, you know, if you can package that many small projects close to the load where the demand for the power is, and couple it with a lot of localized storage within buildings, or, you know, on the landscaped areas on commercial industrial sites, this could solve a lot of problems, not just the land use problems, but also grid integrity and efficiency and reliability. So we looked at what the carbon impacts would be and the land impacts of the different scenarios. And you can see that for our two lower impact scenarios, you know, we excluded the biomap lands and the prime farmlands. So that's 0 going forward. And there's, if we continue on the current path, there's considerable impact there, but there's also loss of almost 6 million metric tons of carbon storage across the landscape. So that's another cost consideration to take into account. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So here are some results in terms of how much would go in different kinds of areas under the different scenarios. I'm not going to go into a lot of this in detail because I'm trying to be very brief here, but there's a lot more information in the report on these results and on the methodology. There is a cost differential to doing these lower impact scenarios. It is more costly somewhat, but not as much as you might think. And again, when you think about the trade-off costs, that sort of offsets the additional construction cost. And we also think that the cost of siting on the rooftops could be brought down. There's a lot of barriers here. And some of them are just like administrative, dealing with many more entities. And also some like permitting related issues. There's issues right now with like how much of a rooftop can be covered with solar, and still, because under the firefighting code, you still have to provide access for firefighters to be able to move around on the rooftop, etc. And local permitting issues. But we just think that to the extent the state is providing incentives, money from the ratepayers to develop solar, those funds would be better spent addressing these kinds of higher costs of the within development projects instead of providing money to cut down forests. And this is kind of the summary, like why we think this is so important. This is from the state's net zero by 2050 plan, decarbonization plan. And when you look out towards 2050, what's most important to understand is that, we're not going to get to actual zero emissions. There are some things that are just really hard to eliminate altogether. So we're going to need to offset that with something. And right now, there's all this work being done on carbon capture technologies and all that, but it's very expensive, and there's nothing that can do carbon capture at scale like forests and other land cover, forests, wetlands, soils, etc. So we need to maintain as much of the capacity of the state's lands to provide that offsetting role as possible. And that loss of almost 6 million metric tons of carbon in the landscape would cost, I think it was something like 980. I'm going to get the number wrong. I better just refer you to the report. At any rate, what we found was that the cost of paying for some other form of offset for that lost carbon was basically equivalent to the relative increased cost of doing the development within the built environment and not cutting down those forests. So at the end of the day, when you look at all the pieces here, what we're saying is we can get the solar we need while protecting nature, the forests that we have, and it's all going to come out to be about the same cost at the end of the day. So we have some recommendations. We're working right now on fleshing this out in more detail. We think that the legislature is probably going to do a big climate bill this session. And so we're working on providing legislators key leadership in the TUE committee for recommendations for how this could be done. And we're working with many other organizations. We have what we call our solar partners, which include not just environmental organizations, but also some folks from the solar industry advising us, and some regional planning folks too, advising us on all of this. So that's where we are, and these are the key takeaways, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Heidi. Yeah, if you have a question, feel free to raise your hand, speak out, or put it in the chat. I can kick it off by saying I know that you're Mass, Audubon, and Massachusetts specific, but just maybe a note or a question of if you know anything about these trends continuing on the other side of the border. Obviously, those incentives would be different in Rhode Island, but I know that we've seen a lot of large ground-mounted solar arrays in Rhode Island as well.
Yeah, I know that the Narragansett Bay Estuary Program is looking very closely at that, and they're in touch with John Rogan from Clark University. They're doing some mapping and analysis of all this. I've been asked to give a presentation with them at the Rhode Island Land and Water Summit in March. So I expect to learn more from them soon. So we are connecting the dots across the boundary.
Perfect, thanks. Ted?
Yeah, Heidi, you said, I think towards the end that the protecting nature option was overall preferred. And I know you're going through, and maybe I missed something. I knew there was the kind of the way we're doing it, first option, then there was a middle option, and then there was a third option. So are you saying it's the second or the third option is the one that preferred?
I think the second option is the one that we are most focused on.
Okay.
Moving in that direction. Because that's the one where there's really, a lot of options for where these things could go, and it's not, really severely constrained.
Thanks.
Any other questions that folks have about growing solar?
Yes, sorry, I don't know how to put my hand up, but
got it.
I had a question about I know the low impact one included flood zones. Would that be including like undeveloped flood zones, or like if you have a house that's already existing in a flood zone, would you be able to put solar on that, or would that like be a further constriction?
Right. So the lowest impact one, we excluded all flood zones. But if there was a structure already there, that would have been like for rooftop,
Mhm.
that would have still been included as a possible site because
Okay.
the rooftop analysis was separate from the land analysis.
Okay, cool. So if it was pre-developed, it could have it just like beautiful undisturbed flood zones would be left
Right,
to
but
their
we
own
don't want
devices.
to,
Yeah,
exactly,
exactly.
but
You
we
don't
don't,
want to.
we don't want to put a lot of new ground mount arrays in the flood zones because it's a hazard for the array as well.
Yeah, Jamuna.
Hi, Heidi. Hi, everyone. Thank you for the nice presentation. My question is, I have two questions. Like, how do we choose the grounds for integrating the solar panels in the area? And is there any specific reasons within Massachusetts have higher solar potentials?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the second question.
Oh, I can repeat again. Is there any specific reasons within Massachusetts that have higher solar potentials?
Higher solar potential. Well, there are some features of the land that make them higher or lower potential. So just from the land itself, areas actually in Southeast Mass have slightly greater solar, the sun shining on them because they're further south. There's also considerations for slope and aspect. So if it's facing south versus north, etc. And how steep the slopes are. Then there's proximity to an interconnection, and we considered that to some extent in our analysis as well. So if it's close to a substation, for example, it's a lot more cost effective to connect than if you're further away from a substation. Some of the substations don't have capacity to accept more, so that's a whole nother thing. So yes, And the other thing I would say also about integrating more within the developed environment is that we also want the incentives to be adjusted to enable everyone to benefit from this. So low income renters, more community solar projects that are done by like doing a big array on a school rooftop or even a commercial rooftop, and then having that be co-owned by many different people, or ways to tap into it.
Thank you.
Yeah, if there's maybe one more question, and then we'll ask Heidi to talk about these wetland regulations. Okay, Heidi, if you want to move on and give us an update on, I know this is very Massachusetts specific, everybody, but it's very important. We're watershed, right? Water runs downhill, starts in Mass, it's going to come to you, Rhode Island. So yeah, what's going on with these different changes?
Sure. And how brief do you want me to be? Like 5 minutes? Or
Yeah, I think maybe like a 5-minute overview, and then for folks that are interested, we can ask other questions. And I would also point people, I put on the PowerPoint next, there's an information session on this if you want to learn more. So the 23rd at 1 p.m. you do have to register for it, but it'll be from DEP going over all the specifics.
yeah, and I'd also add that the Mass Association of Conservation Commissions is doing a free lunch and learn next Wednesday, and that's on their website, and you can sign up. Maybe we can find the link and provide that as well.
Yes, that's also in our notes. I just didn't put it on a slide, but I should have. Good point.
Okay, and I'm working with them on that. So at that, we're not just going to repeat kind of what DEP does. DEP actually already has their overview slides up on their website now, so people can go there and look at that. Gives a good summary. But the MACC Lunch and Learn will give just a very brief overview, and then a lot more time for Q&A. And the folks, including myself, who are going to be presenting there, will give some highlights of analysis where what we think is really good and what we're concerned about within the regs as well, to start giving people some guidance on things they might want to look at. So I'll just back up and say briefly what this is. This is stuff that DEP has been working on for, 4 years ago, just before the pandemic hit. I think the last meeting I attended with state agencies was a meeting of the Stormwater Advisory Committee in February of 2020. And the Land Subject to Coastal Storm Flowage, or AKA Coastal Floodplain Advisory Committee, at last met, well before that. So we've been waiting 4 years for them to finally, do the regulations to a point where they could come out for public review, and that's where we are now. So there are 3 interrelated sets of regulations. It's the DEP wetlands regulations, the waterways regulations, which is Tidelands, Chapter 91, and the 401 water quality certification regulations. So they're doing some cross-cutting where there's intersection of these issues across all 3. But the wetlands regulations are probably the ones that are, the place to start looking at. That's where the biggest changes are. Covers 2 major categories of topics. So the coastal stuff, may or may not be of interest to all of you. But for the first time, the state is going to establish standards for development and redevelopment within the coastal floodplain. And they have proposed to prohibit new buildings, new structures within the highest risk area, the velocity zone, where waves can be over 3 feet high, and then requiring elevation of buildings and limiting fill in the rest of the floodplain, making sure that it's not diverting water onto other properties. One thing that I'm really looking closely at is that there are 8 interests under the act, and they're proposing that the floodplain is only presumed to be significant to 2 of those interests: storm damage prevention and flood damage prevention. I think that these areas are important for other things too, like if it's an undeveloped floodplain, habitat, water quality protection, etc. So the part that's probably of more interest to the majority of you is the stormwater changes. And these are big, big changes, very important. They're finally proposing to update the way precipitation events are calculated for designing projects. That we've been using data that really was pre-1960, all these years, and they're now proposing to use the NOAA 2014 atlas and what they're calling the plus version of that, so the 90th percentile numbers. So that's really important that stormwater and also culverts, will be sized at least to meet relatively recent current data. It still isn't going to get us to what are we going to do about it as things continue to increase in intensity in the future, but it's a whole lot better than what we've been doing to date. They're updating the entire stormwater manual in conjunction with this. It's like 586 pages or something. It's a big document. But the other big change they're making is that they're requiring that all development designs use what we would call low impact development. They're calling it environmentally sensitive site design or green infrastructure, whatever you want to call it. They're requiring the minimize imperviousness, use trees and other plants and soils to capture and infiltrate water, giving credit for not destroying the entire buffer zone, leaving some naturally vegetated buffer, planting trees, and really trying to both require that unless it's not feasible on a site and also incentivize it.
And maybe note that a lot of this
yeah.
isn't necessarily entirely out of the blue, right? They're like using low impact development to the maximum extent practicable was already in the stormwater guide, but this is going to be a little bit more clear and stringent, it sounds like.
Right. So instead of maximum extent practicable, it's like unless infeasible, which is supposedly a higher standard. It's still going to be very subjective and subject to alternatives analysis, but there's a lot of detail in there about what exactly that means and what the design should look like for different categories of development, etc. They're also talking about increasing the infiltration requirement. The draft regulations say the first inch needs to be infiltrated across all soil types, but they are considering changing that to 0.8. I know they're going to get a lot of pushback from development interests on all of this. And even if they can fully move forward with everything they're proposing, they're not going to be 100% aligned with what's already in the MS4 permit. So they're still going to have like two different, for people who are in an MS4 area, there's still going to be slightly more stringent requirements anyway. So I would just say that we need a lot of people to look at this and to write comments and to support the big picture of where DEP is trying to go here with climate resilience, both for the coast and for stormwater. And the third thing I would highly recommend you comment on is what should be in their next regulatory package, because they are inviting comments on like what else should we be doing, because they're calling this a 1.0 package, and then there's going to be a climate resilience 2.0 package, hopefully sometime in the next year or so. So I'm going to be submitting comments about like streamlining restoration. That would be my big high level comment there.
And for folks who say, yes, this is great, I agree with you, but I don't feel like I know enough to write my own comment letter, do you have something that you can share, or do you know when you have something that you can share that people can kind of mimic the language of or sign on to?
Yeah, so we are working on that. I'm working closely with MACC, the Association of Mass Wetland Scientists, the MSMCP, Mass Society of Municipal Conservation Professionals, on all of this, and we have a big spreadsheet, and we've divided up the work, and we're trying to fill in pieces of it. So the lunch and learn, we will have at least some of those high level points, like here are some things to think about that we support or that we think are of concern and that we, suggest you might take a look at and comment on. I'm also going to be doing an alert for our climate champions, hoping to have that done next week. That would have some high level points. I think MACC is going to do some more detailed recommendations for conservation commissioners and agents working with MSMCP. Not sure exactly when they're going to have that or what it's going to look like. They'll have some of it for the lunch and learn and then more later. The comment deadline is March 1st, but the hearings are like the end of January, the very beginning of February. So if people want to make oral comments, we have to have at least high level points for folks by the end of next week, I think.
And Sarah, did you want to comment on that too?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that Mass Rivers will be convening group of people who are interested in commenting on this. Catherine, our policy director, excuse me, is leading the effort from Mass Rivers. And so I believe she sent out an email earlier this week with like a doodle poll on our first meeting. So it will likely be next week. I think she's leaning towards next Friday. So if you aren't already looped into her email regarding this, feel free to, I'll pop her email in the chat and feel free to reach out so that she adds you to her communications list. But we are planning to, start a group to start to talk about, thoughts, pros and cons with these regulations. And so we're kind of convening a group to collaborate on comments. And if that interests you, we'd love for you to join.
Thanks so much, Sarah. I should have mentioned, I neglected to mention that Mass Rivers, Catherine is involved in that other group as well, working with MACC, MSMCP, and me.
No worries.
Too. So yeah, I think that's great. There's a lot of info here, and we're going to need comments, lots of comments, both at the high level and digging in more deeply for those who have the ability to do that.
Great. Are there other questions? I just want to spend maybe another minute or two on this, and then we'll transition into the rest of our agenda. Other questions, comments that folks might have? Okay, well, thank you so much, Heidi, for giving us that overview. And we have the link in the chat to the MACC Lunch and Learn. This is the DEP program that's happening next week as well. So definitely encourage folks to check it out and learn what's going on and to make comments. And I would just encourage you and say, if you feel like you don't know what you're talking about, you probably do more than you know, and that you can always learn from these other groups and really mimic their comments. And they do take comments seriously. And as Heidi said, they're definitely going to get a lot of comments from people opposing these changes from the development community. So they need the environmentalists and others to kind of also say, no, we need this. Let's be more realistic in our stormwater management and, being more thoughtful about climate resilience and development standards. Perfect. So let's run through some of our other specific topic area updates, and then I'll hand it over to you all on general updates. As usual, I don't have anything for Bikeway or Greenway, but I would offer an opportunity if anyone else has updates that they wanted to share on that. Okay. For university updates, I wanted to welcome our new spring intern. She's going to be working on hydropower. Jamuna, if you want to introduce yourself quickly and just say, maybe mention your previous work, what your status is at Clark here, and then what you're working on.
Sure. Thank you so much, Stephanie. So my name is Jamuna Prajapati and I'm from Nepal. I'm here at Clark University doing my grad studies in environmental science and policy. I get to work last summer in Mystic River Watershed Association, where the agenda was to clean water chestnut removal programs for the summer, and also knowing about the cyanobacteria, how it's dealing with the health of people, That was the main thing. And yeah, right now I'll be working with Steph and Kelly. I'm so much thankful to George Parking Marsh Institute for getting me in. And yeah, thank you so much for having me here.
Yeah, thanks. And thank you for jumping in, even though I entirely put you on the spot and didn't warn you. So great job. So Jimoon is going to be looking at the pros and cons of hydropower and some of that policy, and specifically thinking about Massachusetts and Rhode Island. Kind of like what Heidi was saying of we support solar, but we want a careful siting, right? We support hydro as an alternative energy production, but we want to be really careful about siting and other considerations for environmental and cultural considerations. So we're really looking forward to what she comes up with here, and we'll have some hopefully basic outreach materials to share with you all as this progresses. Anyone else have university-based updates that they want to share, or specific work that's happening at your university that you'd like to mention? I should also mention we are in conversation with Roger Williams University to potentially hire a law intern, environmental law intern, to focus on water questions around dams. So some of the questions that we have discussed so far are, what are dam owners' responsibilities to offer portage around their dams? Thinking about, what if we don't know the ownership of a dam, kind of what happens in that case, and some examples of what others have done successfully. So we'll keep you updated on that as we continue those conversations and what comes up there. For Fish Passage, the big update, I think we've mentioned this before, but please save the date. May 19th is our next Fish Passage or Fish Migration Parade. We're hoping it's even bigger and better than last year. And we will be also at the Saltwater Angler Show in Providence, March 8th through 10th. We'll have our paper fish there. If you remember from last year, this is the fish on the screen here. We'll be coloring those fish, fun kids activity, and also just asking people to attend this. We're also looking for sponsors because we want to be able to have a tent, and tents are apparently very expensive to rent. So if you have organizations that might be interested in sponsoring, we would love to have you at any sponsorship level. We're looking at a tent that's probably around $4,000. We have other costs as well that we are trying to cover. Some of that is from grants, but sponsorships really help us. So we'll get you more information about that if you're interested. This will be a very family-friendly day. It's from 1 to 4 p.m. at Slater Mill in Pawtucket. And we'll have lots of different community organizations. If you are interested in tabling, if you have an activity that you'd like to bring, we'd love to have you. So a couple of different things we're looking at. Emily Vogler with her wonderful crazy ideas. If you guys remember her from Rhode Island School of Design, she is creating a 20-foot long watershed model or river model of the river. So we're very excited to have that and be able to kind of interact in a different way. We'll have some posters of the river and be asking people, you know, where do you like to recreate? Where do you see that there are problems that we need to work on? So we definitely want to be interactive here, getting information from the community and not just kind of telling them about this fish migration as well. We're of course going to be having drumming and dancing. This is hosted by the Narragansett Indian Tribe and the Hassanamisco Band of Nipmuc. We'll have a couple of speakers. We're working on the mayor of Pawtucket speaking, as well as someone from DEM. And we've also invited EPA Regional Administrator David Cash. So hoping to get kind of different levels of government and tribes working together and all supporting this really important need to restore migratory fish on the Blackstone River. Are there any other updates that folks want to share around Fish Passage? I should mention that we do have an advisory committee that was established in November. We intentionally skipped December. We were going to meet in January. It didn't quite happen. So I think our meeting is going to be in February. We're working to schedule that, but hopefully once we have that meeting, we'll have a bit more information for you on what happened with that $30 million grant to NOAA, because I don't know the answer yet. So hopefully we'll have more information soon. Anyone else want to add anything on Fish Passage? Okay. So May 19th, save the date. water quality updates, and would encourage you to check out these two opportunities. So Mass Rivers, DER, and the Charles River Watershed Association have put together this Dam Busters monthly webinar series. I've mentioned it before. I'll probably mention it again, but it's a really nice way to just take about an hour and learn about these different topics, whether it's permitting, scoping a project, managing sediment, introductions, community engagement. They also record all of these sessions. So if it doesn't fit into your schedule or you missed it and you want to catch up, you can go to their website and check it out. Haley might get you a link to that one. And then also, we just learned about a national initiative as well to create a community of practice around dam removal practitioners and those who want to learn. So something very similar. They're going to have meetings for folks to learn more about this topic on a national level. So we'd also encourage you to check that out if dam removal is a topic you're interested in. Thank you, Sarah. You're so on top of things. Perfect. We also are going to be, we're trying to be a bit more intentional about this. So I know Worcester, sorry, I mentioned I have a puppy. He's chewing my power cord currently. The joys of puppies. Worcester CSO is definitely a hot topic, and it's something that we want to schedule another tour. We're working with our partners at all levels to kind of figure out what is happening of addressing CSOs in Worcester, but just to keep you posted on the events that are occurring. So these are the last 3 events from December and January. Sorry, I put them in the wrong order there. But historically, they've always sort of said, you know, we minimally treat, right? We do sediment settling and chlorination and dechlorination to our combined sewers before it's hitting the Blackstone River, unless there's a very large event and it overwhelms the system, and then that sewage untreated is having to bypass the system and go into the Blackstone River. So we're seeing that happen more and more frequently. It used to be, oh, it's happened only a handful of times in my career, and now we've seen it happen many times just in the past year or two. So the last couple of storms, December 18th and January 20th, both released over I'm realizing that one is a point and one is a comma. Kaylee, you want to check those numbers for me? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
One of the storms was a lot bigger than
Okay.
the other one. The December 18th one was a lot larger.
Sorry for not fixing my, I forget the word for that, but important numerals, right? So basically 11 million gallons one time, but almost 24,000 million gallons, which is, gosh, I'm not even going to try the numbers there, but over a billion? Is that? No, not quite a billion. What's 23,000 million? Someone who's better at numbers than me. I have to write it out to see it. A lot of stormwater. So we do know that a lot of this is rainwater. So it's very diluted sewage, right? It's not just straight sewage. We have these events because we have all of the stormwater, but it's still a definite health concern and safety concern. And certainly, you know, impacts water quality within our river system. Any other updates that folks want to share on water quality? Donna.
Yes, thank you, Stephanie. The Blackstone River Coalition's Water Quality Monitoring Summit is scheduled for April 5th in the morning at tentatively at the Cumberland Public Library, known as the Monastery. So we'll be getting more word as the date approaches. I'm not sure of the timing, but I would recommend folks attend. I don't know if it'll be hybrid or not, but it's great that we're having the summit.
Can you say that date one more time? Was it April 5th? Oh, take your time.
April 5th.
April 5th.
Saturday.
Perfect. We will add that to our events and our notes. Thanks, Donna.
Hey, Stephanie, on the December 18th, I'm looking at the notice, and it was 23.779 million untreated, and the treated was 42.673, according to the notice that day. So you just might want to double check your numbers.
I will double check that with my helper. I will get you those, and we'll keep this a running tally. We're also working on creating a CSO webpage, so we'll have that information and a link to the city's website there. Also, just to mention, this is more Rhode Island specific, but the Stormwater Innovation Center annual report just came out. So it's an interesting resource. It's pretty brief, but it highlights some of the different BMPs that they've installed, their school programs, examples of signage. So it's a great resource to kind of check out and see what others are doing and what's been successful. Yeah, John, go ahead.
Patty had mentioned about the Woonsocket wastewater plant. I know I got a report of a lot of smell around Woonsocket that day, and I don't know if Woonsocket overflowed during the December event, or there's no way of knowing because I don't think they're monitored.
Yeah, it's a great question. It sounds like maybe a follow-up with EM and ask them what the status is. We also haven't asked for a status update on the Attorney General's citation fine in quite some time as well. So it's a good question. We can ask that. So one other topic before I transition it all over to you is we've been talking a lot about culvert assessments again. We did that over last summer, and we got a lot of comments saying that folks were interested in doing that again this summer. So I wanted to ask you guys, if we offered this again, if we had funding for it, would you want to get certified in culvert assessment through the North Atlantic Aquatic Connectivity Collaborative this summer? You can say maybe, like, depending on where it is or the dates, obviously, but I'll give you just a minute to think about this one, and then I'll close the poll. We're just trying to get an idea of how many folks, obviously there might be folks outside of this meeting as well, but how many folks are interested and whether it's worth it to spend some more time on this and offer it again. I'll give you another few seconds. Okay, so it seems like we're pretty split. Some folks say yes, some folks say no, some folks say maybe is the highest. So we will think about if we can get some funding for that.
Steph, we had a culvert that on the December storm in Lincoln along the Blackstone Canal that was overcome by water, and it washed a big pile of sand into the canal. There's so much sand in there that it's sticking above the water level of the canal.
Wow, yeah. We definitely have a lot of undersized culverts, for sure. Yeah, that's another good question. If folks have specific culverts that they know of that are issues, feel free to just shoot me an email, shoot Kaylee an email, let us know, and we can go out and check it out. And, the first step of fixing a problem is recognizing that there is one and writing it down somewhere that this has been an issue, documenting that. So we're happy to do that, put it into the database, and then try and follow up with the community to see if it's a priority for them of replacement and finding funding for that. Great. So other updates that folks have that they want to share? It's open to you guys now. Keep doing this.
Stephanie, this is Ted Beauvais from the BRWA, and we, along with the Blackstone River Coalition, have been able to make an offer to a person to take over the duties from Mike Sperry to do the mid-reach field coordinator job. That's kind of from the Rhode Island line up north to around Sutton or Grafton area, 28 monitoring sites. And Emily Dart will be doing that job starting in the spring, and she'll be introduced and people can meet her at the Water Quality Summit that Donna was talking about on April 5th down in Cumberland.
Great. Congratulations. Thanks. Judy and then Patty.
Mute. Can you hear me?
Yes, go
Hello?
ahead, Patty, and then Judy.
Oh, yeah.
Patty, go ahead.
Can you hear me? Okay. I just wanted to mention I am here as an individual now, still interested in the Blackstone River, but I recently retired at the end of November from the Tourism Council, although I still maintain my ties there. And just but I did recently just stop by the office, and John, you may remember this, and maybe even Donna. Back in 2005, because of all the major flooding, I started thinking about this. And back in 2005, the Tourism Council hosted a River Users Conference. I don't know if John and Donna, if you remember that. And we had some information that the Tourism Council had put together, and I had worked on that with regard to effects from the flooding in 2005. And Bob, I think, is looking into revisiting some of that. And I do know that they are thinking about having another potential River Users Conference, or willing to host a Rivers Users Conference to talk about the issues with the flooding. And John, I did mention to Bob some of the issues you had at Sycamore Landing. And I shared some photos with John and Stephanie of Central Falls Landing seems to be it doesn't look like it's going to be accessible in the near future because of the recent damage from the flooding rains, which is kind of sad because that was our educational opportunities with the River Explorer. And luckily the canal boat didn't end up down river because it was hanging out there precariously for a while. They weren't able to get it out of the river because the river was low, and then it got so high so fast. But they did end up having to pull that out with a crane to get that out of the river, so they didn't lose it. And it just seems like future storms just seem to be going to be continue to come as they have. You know, it's either one year it's drought, one year it's too much rain. It's either too little or too much. So I don't know if I told Bob that, Stephanie, that maybe the collaborative would be a place where some of that information could be co-hosted or, shared if they do end up reestablishing the Blackstone Alert website with information, because you could add Massachusetts information like Massachusetts EMA, things like that. But if you are interested, I will email you the person you should reach out to and contact over there. It would either be Sam or Laura McNamara, who was their communications outreach person. So I'll email that information if there's any interest. And I'll let you, and John, if you want to reach out too. I just think it's an important topic, and it does, because it all ties in together with water quality and other issues when you have the rivers raging as they do. So I just throwing that out there. And also I'm available to help with any social media publicity for the collaborative for Watershed Council for Rhode Island, now that I have some free time.
I love it. I might take you up on that, Patty.
Yeah.
And yeah, having a website to share that river gauge data and MEMA information, I think would be great. So happy to chat about that. Go ahead.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. I just have a couple of quick announcements. Just a reminder that the pre-RFR informational meeting for our 604B and 319 grants is next week, Wednesday the 24th from 9:30 to 11:30. I'll put the registration link in the chat for anyone who's interested in attending. And also, we just released our ad for our summer seasonals for the Watershed Planning Program. For any students or professors who are on the call today, or if anyone knows any students or professors who might be interested, they can share it. The position will begin in early May and will extend through the end of September. And first consideration is given to applicants that apply within the first 14 days. And the job was posted on the 17th. So that would be everyone who applies by the 31st, I guess. And you can find that at our Mass Careers website. And I'll also put that link in the chat for anybody who's interested.
Thank you, Judy. Looking forward to those too. John.
Hi, everyone. I just want to make everyone aware that our board of directors, at our last meeting, voted to hire a new executive director. So Bruce Curlis will be our new executive director starting February 1st on a 6-month trial basis. So I'm hoping we can really ramp things up and move forward with our executive director.
That's fantastic. Congratulations. Very exciting. And we'll look forward to having him thrown in all those hours to help plan this Fish Passage Parade and all the other great events you have going on. I know you guys had a cleanup scheduled for tomorrow. Is that still happening with the snow on the ground?
Say that again?
I know you had a cleanup scheduled, I think, for tomorrow. Is
Oh,
that still
yes.
happening with the snow?
Yes, but we're still gonna do something. We might have 8 or 9 people there. Sycamore Landing got destroyed during the past flooding. The trails are kind of wrecked with big rutting and things like that. And a lot of litter came in on the first storm, and the second flood took some of it away, but there's piles of sand everywhere and there's down trees. And I think worst case scenario, we're gonna be working on down trees in the area because I think the litter is gonna be hidden by the snow and ice. So if anyone wants to come to Environmental Center at 100 New River Road, we'll be there from 9 to 1 on Saturday.
Great, thanks, John. Are there other updates folks want to share? I know, thanks, I think Carrie put something in the chat about a new culvert replacement municipal assistance grant, RFR being in February, and a briefing next Tuesday at 1 p.m. We can share that in our notes. Anything else that folks want to share? I have another question for you guys then. One more. I can get it up. There we go. So if you original Blackstoners from the first meeting 2.5 years ago, we met in person and it was a mild disaster. We did not have great internet connection, so that was a poor choice of location on my part. We chose the exact center of the watershed, and that was the most equitable that I could make it, but it wasn't good on the technology side to make it hybrid. So we would like to maybe try to have an in-person meeting again, fixing that technology piece. We would stay hybrid, so for folks that are still coming from far away, no problem. But it's come up a few times that folks would be interested in all getting together and making it a bit more of an event, trying to feed you and just chat a bit more in person. It's always more interactive when you're in person. So it seems like mid-watershed maybe, and yes, meeting, but maybe not in March. I picked March because next month is too soon, but March might be a good time for it. Feel free to unmute yourselves too. What would be the best month you think? I know March has a lot of conferences, and maybe it's not a good time to travel with everything else going on. Would April be a good time to meet in person, do you think?
Yeah, for town people, town employees, April will be better than May because of the town meeting stuff.
That's a good point too. The town meeting in May, April would be maybe okay, or yeah. Okay, so maybe we'll look for our April meeting and we'll get back to next month for sure about that. But our April meeting would be April 19th. So we can pin that for potentially our in-person our in-person meeting. Thanks, Judy. Yeah, great. We will put that in our notes. There are a ton of jobs in the notes as well. So for folks that are interested, check those out, share those with your colleagues and friends. Let's see. There we go. If there isn't anything else, I can let you guys go. I don't think there's anything specific on our end. We will be meeting next time on February 16th, and we're going to be having John Rogan and Deb Martin, who run the HERO program at Clark University, be talking about their work. They originally were looking, they did a lot of research into the Asian longhorn beetle infestation in Worcester and surrounding areas, and how that tree cover has changed over time now that it's been, gosh, how many years? 2008 to today. So yeah, we're presenting on that research. So thanks everybody for joining, and we'll see you next time on February 16th. Thanks all.